Welcome to tonight's webinar. I would like to start with a brief overview of what is energy healing, because that's always good to keep things in perspective. And then we'll go into 3 minutes of silence. The foundation of energy healing is consciousness. And so we're going to take some time to just dive into that deep ocean of pure consciousness. The topic of tonight's meeting is energy healing for dealing with unprecedented challenges. And I certainly meant the types of challenges that we're facing at this time that are unlike the challenges that our predecessors faced. And we have to step up to meet those challenges in ways that essentially we're creating ourselves as we go along. So that can make things more dynamic and more interesting and also more scary. And anyway, it just seemed like really I've been avoiding touching on this topic because it's such an intense topic, but it's time. It's just time to do it. So, all right. So what's energy healing? Energy healing is the process of folding consciousness into its own nature. It's the process of using awareness, which is the part of our consciousness that we have autonomous control over, and directing it into the field of creation, into the body, into the subtle layers of creation, into the external field of creation, wherever it needs to go. We focus our attention in order to open up, or I would say anchor, whatever it is that we're focusing on with the source of creation, because awareness itself is pure source material. So wherever the awareness goes, it shines the light of pure consciousness upon that, and it activates and enlivens it. It's pretty nice. Laws of nature. These are laws of nature of how consciousness works. It's pretty sweet that it works like that. And it's leveraging, energy healing leverages that law of nature, those laws of nature, for the advantage of well-being and health. So it's very simple. Yeah. Sometimes I take a lot longer to give you the overview, but we'll go into the details of it as we move along with tonight's topic. The reason we take 3 minutes right at the beginning is so that we can allow our awareness to become inwardly directed even for a few minutes here, and find our way into that deepest, most abstract level of the field of consciousness, ultimately the source of creation, from whence all of this creation has come, and from whence we have come, and our bodies, and everything is made of consciousness. So we take a few minutes to just honor and enjoy that, because it's probably one of my favorite parts I like talking to you guys, but it is one of my favorite parts of the meeting too, is that deep silence time. So let's do that first. Don't mind the time. I will let you know when 3 minutes has passed. And then when I ask you to open the eyes, let's take a minute to slowly open the eyes. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's slowly open our eyes. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything. Thank you for being all of us, for being the whole universe, for being the immeasurably precious connection, tradition of wisdom that connects the unmanifest absolute with the entire field of its expression. Thank you for our time during the webinar. May we use our time well. May it be satisfying for each person who came, for each one of you, for each one of us, and for all those who will watch and participate later. Thank you to each one of you for bestowing on me the privilege of being the voice of tonight's session. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be able to help in any way that I can. All right. So, what about these unprecedented challenges? I feel like I'm a little over prepared. Usually often I come into the webinars with, like, I don't even know what I'm going to say. I don't even know anything. But I realize that what's important for our collective, what's important for this webinar in looking at energy healing for these challenges of our time is to wake up and engage our consciousness and our position in the collective field to the challenges in such a way as to benefit everyone. And I am always very careful not to mention political things because, politics is messy these days. It's a little messy. But I do need to define the challenge. I do need to define the unprecedented challenges at least a little bit before we dive into solutions. And so let us take just a minute. And I do have a list. I've got a whole list. I asked AI, what are the biggest challenges facing the world these days? And AI gave me a list. So, we've got that, plus lots of people sent in questions. So it's going to be nice to dive into all of that. Clearly, there's a lot of shaking going on under the surface in our world right now. And a friend of mine gave me a metaphor yesterday, which I thought was hilarious and made sense. He said it's as if the whole earth is like a movie set. And there are literally two separate movies that are being filmed on the same set at the same time. So the actors from the two separate movies keep bumping into each other and getting surprised that when they bump into someone who's following the other storyline, that it's like that, oh yeah, there are people that aren't following my same storyline. And we have this sort of division that's taking place in our world. And it's the division seems to be kind of corrupting or eating away at the fabric of our culture in the Western world, and not just in the US, but obviously Canada and the Western hemisphere, Australia and Europe and the Western world. So it's very unusual, and we need to take a look at this. without getting political, because you guys should know that among everybody who's listening, and there are quite a lot of people listening here, I'd say at least, it looks like at least 100 people are listening. We have people representing both of those movie scripts here. And so it's a beautiful opportunity to find the deeper truth that's behind. You've got this one storyline going and the other storyline going, and they're not meeting very well. And it's a beautiful opportunity to find what is that thread of truth that makes both storylines charming and ensures that both movies, once they get finished, will be hits, will reach the theaters and delight the audiences. So we know that all stories come back to one original story. And the original story is the story of the one eternal source of creation, showing up in this reality is all this manifest material world. It's all of it. And that process is there's a sort of universal pattern by which that happens. You could almost call it an algorithm because it's so predictable. But our ability to unify and to deal with what's happening needs to come from a level of creative and intuitive understanding about how to apply solutions and how to use consciousness to find solutions for challenges. And in that story, in that universal story, the hero starts out in his fullness and his grace and thinks that his life is going to follow a certain pattern, and then discovers that it's not, that he's cast out into the wild world, and he cannot follow an algorithmic set of solutions to his problems, but he has to think on his feet. And he has to, throughout the course of the story, let go of a lot of presuppositions about his own nature, about the nature of creation, eventually stripped of so many presuppositions, stripped of so many ideas and assumptions and judgments and concepts about his own nature. He comes back to his essential self. The point in the story where the hero has let go of a lot. He's let go of everything that he thought he was and he thought he was going to be, and he comes back to his simplest, most fundamental form, is the point where he also has to undergo the greatest purification. So purification is part of that great eternal story of the hero's journey. And the purification, of course, involves all that stripping away of all the excess and unnecessary qualities or features of self. But there's also that point where, in that state of rawness and in that state of being kind of on his own, entirely dependent on himself, he has to go face that which he fears the most. His greatest fear. Whatever that is. Every storyline is a little different, but whatever is the greatest fear, he faces that. And in doing so, he discovers his true nature. Having let go of everything he thought he was, then he discovers his true nature. And in discovering his true nature, he truly gains the status. He gains the fundamental qualities of self required to actually complete the original intention of the story. Remember, the original intention, the hero is at home and he's doing well and he's going to evolve into his next, the prince is going to become a king, and it's by going through that process that he really gains true kingship, true greatness, and returns home, of course, victorious. It's the story of the one rising into the entire manifest field of creation and entering into that truth of its nature. The manifest field of creation has to strip away everything that is not an optimal or is not a sufficient, physically sufficient to embody the one. So the one creates the whole universe, but then the universe, the forms of the universe, have to become their most essential form in order for them to embody that pure consciousness and that pure being that is the one source of creation. So that one source of creation energy comes through the material field of expression in a way that's truly representative of its greatness, of its potential. So a lot of, I'd say, refinement and stripping away of the excess occurs in the physical forms of creation, so that eventually they are so refined, the physical form is so refined that it's able to be a perfect vessel for divine expression. So it's lovely when that happens. And the divine fulfills its potential within that form. And I would say all of energy healing is that. All of energy healing. Whenever the part of the body falls ill, it's fallen ill because that part of the body is insufficient to hold all the fullness of the divine source within it. You guys have heard me say this before. I've said it hundreds of times, hundreds of thousands of times. So I'm not going to dwell a long time on that, because we need to get back to the issue at hand, which is that at this time, all of us are impacted and our lives are shaped by the cultural changes that are taking place in our world. And the cultural changes that are taking place on both storylines, like, aren't really all necessarily the best changes, right? Both storylines are heading in a direction. Both heroes in both stories are saying, wow, looks like I'm headed into hell to face my greatest fear. So what does the hero do? How do we, coming down to more detail on this, without too much detail, of course, because not wanting to step on any toes politically, but lots of people asked really great questions. And I have this wonderful list. I asked AI, what are the greatest challenges that are facing humanity at this time? And AI gave me a randomly produced list. So it didn't prioritize those. So I had to kind of go through and prioritize myself. And the point that came out at the top of the list for me was access to education. Now, AI has AI, if AI even thinks, but AI's idea is, though, that means that in a lot of countries and a lot of parts of the world, they're just people who are illiterate. They don't have access to education. But when I was looking at that, the reason I put it number one is I feel that more of an underlying principle here is access to truth with a capital T, because that which sustains the creation is Dharma, and Dharma stands on truth. Truth, it has four pillars: truth, compassion, purity, and that sort of wonderful ability to kind of know when to let go and when to hold on, right? And the ability to let go when you have to, basically, to be able just to let go. And the Sanskrit terms, there's single Sanskrit terms for these values, but when we translate those Sanskrit terms into English, they take on, we have to use many English words to describe them because they're really, really abstract concepts, right? Truth, knowledge, knowingness, the direct experience of pure consciousness, right? The direct experience of one's essential nature. That's truth. Compassion, but also love, understanding, mercy, forgiveness, gratitude, all those qualities. Purity, but also orderliness and cleanliness and refinement even. And here, tapas is the word. And tapas is usually translated as austerity in English, but it really means that ability to let go, but really to know how much to let go and when to let go. And, it's like that's a complicated thing sometimes, letting go. And in the history of the universe, these four pillars stand everywhere. But in some times in creation, they all stand strong. So whatever challenge you are facing can be handled by any one of them to any degree. You can give any amount of love into a situation and it will help push evolution forward, or any amount of cleanliness into it, orderliness, and it will push it forward. But at this time in history, this is not the case. We have three legs broken and one leg standing. That's what we have right now. And it's only the leg of truth. Oh, and guess what? The leg of truth is under attack, essentially. The leg of truth is right. And I mean, this isn't like, I'm not saying like there's some bad guy out there attacking the leg of truth. No, it's that the way the course of changes in creation have unfolded, we have this situation where we've got the internet. It's absolutely loaded to the gills with information. And, as much of it is true as much of it is not true, but it's all showing up to garner as much of our attention as possible, because our attention, what did I say? You remember? Does anybody remember? Our attention is pure being. Our attention is pure source. So that's the thing that the field wants. It wants our attention. Yeah, it's so obvious, right? It's all calling. We're being called at every point. And some of it's really true, and some of it's really not true. And any of it that is an expression of the material field of creation has the potential to either fully embody and hold divine being in it or not. Because there's some forms that get blown out of the water, that get overwhelmed, that get broken when the force and the flow of divinity goes into that expression. And right now, that's what our culture is experiencing. It's experiencing that the flow and force of divinity is coming through, and the system is fracturing. It's fracturing. And you guys know that everything that shows up at the surface of creation first starts inside. Now, by the time I'm doing this webinar, we've done a lot of our work, you guys. We've been doing these webinars consistently through this time, and we've been looking at this premise actually from different angles for a long time. So, as the light of divine being is working its way into the material field of creation, we're accommodating that the best that we can. And we have been for a really long time. And it is my hope that all the work that's been done on the subtle level, as it's sort of rising up, but hasn't broken to the surface yet, right? That all that subtle work has made a difference, so that and right now, it's really starting to break to the surface. I mean, I would say the sign that I had that it's breaking to the surface right now is that I'm hearing from both sides of the spectrum that everybody seems to agree that it's like a kind of a war that's going on. It's not a hot war. In some places, it's a hot war, but it's not really quite at that level. But it's the sides are in the two storylines, right? They're in such complete disagreement about how that story is supposed to actually unfold that it seems as if the two sides cannot agree. They cannot agree. And as I said, I have people on both sides of the spectrum. And, it's a really interesting spot to be in, because people will come to me from this side and they'll cite a particular scientific research study. And they'll say, this scientific research study proves that my point is right. Say about vaccines. Can I say that word? Anyway, I said it, the V word. about the V word. So I can't even say the word, right? Or I'll get censored off of the. It's so crazy. And then somebody from the other side will come and they'll cite the same exact scientific research study and go, this research study proves my point about the vaccines. And they have exactly opposite points about the vaccines. And I'm just like, I'm sitting here in the middle, right? Like meeting with this person, meeting with this person. And I'm like, but wait a minute. So, I mean, in a way, it is comical. It is comical because the thing is that it illustrates how knowledge, the truth, you could say, well, the research study, like that's the truth, right? That's the big truth right there. It was, clinical testing and, under strict conditions and this and that, and so, but what it goes to show is that our response to the information that we receive from our environment is a far more important player in the way we are going to navigate our way through the changes that are coming down the pikes here, guys. And when I started reading some of these issues, I mean, some of them are rather heavy, and it's our response to that information that's critical. Our response is critical. Truth comes in the form of impulses of intelligence that rise directly from the source of creation. Yes, that's truth. There's the truth right there. Sometimes a research study is funded by somebody who has an ulterior motive in how that research study should come out. Could happen sometimes, sometimes not. Who knows? And then people will take it and they'll still spin it to validate their truth, right? But the point is that truth, real truth, is this constant, continuous flow of impulses of intelligence that are rising from the source of creation. And in Vedic science, we call those richas. And the richas are these impulses of just pure source value. And they rise up and they emanate throughout the universe like a frequency, a little bit like frequency, right? They shake everything. They shake everything as they come emerging from the source of creation, first very subtle and then more concrete, right? And at each level that they come to, they shake all the fabric at that level of expression and they shake it all the way up. And the fact that the truth right now is a little shaky itself, it means that the types of impulses of truth that are rising from the source of creation are very powerful, and they're shaking down to the foundation or the fundamental levels of our world. So that's why I say it's unprecedented times, because what's shaking is so fundamental that it will inevitably result in changes across the board. It will inevitably result in a big transformation of our world. Right? I mean, I could just read you some of them. Climate change. Oh, that could result in a big transformation, right? Nuclear arms and political. I thought I put the nuclear arms together with the political instability. Political instability. Russia-Ukraine crisis and the risk of global conflict, right? That could be huge. One that's not on this list, but I was thinking about lately was the fact that in every country, the power grids of every country are quite vulnerable. And our government has stated that if the power grid went out in America, it could probably take about a year to bring power back. There's several, like about a dozen or so major power stations around the US, and they're very vulnerable. Like they're dozens. My son listed off the other day, he was listening to me like half a dozen or more ways that really conceivably, like really, they could just be taken out. They could just be destroyed. And I thought to myself, wow, Wow, we think, we enjoy the lights and the internet and the electricity and the warmth in the winter and all that, but it's not as stable as we might think it is, especially as technology increases, right? Because I just heard yesterday, were you the one that told me, Tom, about the super viruses? There are, and I don't mean super viruses like viruses that create pandemics in people. I mean computer viruses. That's one of the things that's like, it's a thing now that was not a thing. It was not a thing 10, 15 years ago, even. But there are these, was it thing? When did it start? I don't remember. Did you read it? About 10 years ago. Okay. So the first one was unleashed in Iran about 10 years ago, just as a kind of like experiment. But since then, you guys, many have been made. And guess what? All of our systems run on, um, all of our systems are being administrated through our technology. And so a super virus could come into a country and just take out the whole power grid, basically. But there are many other things that could also do that. It just so happens. I mean, I don't mean to, this webinar isn't about scaring people. This webinar is about, what do you do? What do you do? Well, you can go get yourself a wood stove, I suppose. But more importantly, each one of us will navigate our way through whatever crises may befall our Earth. And because of the way the Earth is stratified right now, the way it's kind of set up, it's very possible for crises to occur that will affect mostly everyone. And so, like, well, climate crisis, for example, the climate change could do that. Anyway, the point is that it's more about how we respond and react to that than it is the actual event, because there are always going to be some people who navigate well, and there'll be those who navigate less well. So what do we need to do? I'm asking being, can you tell? Going back on the self. When awareness settles down to the source of creation, the impulses of intelligence come up pure. They come up straight. They come directly inside to the hearts and minds of each person. And by putting access to truth on this list for myself as number one, my intention is that each one of us has direct access to the information and the resources that we need. At the surface, we can name off all sorts of useful resources, and everybody's idea of what a good resource is going to be slightly different. Like, one person's going to go out and buy guns, somebody else is going to go out and buy firewood. And, there's all different ways they're going to approach that thing. But the point is that the real resource is knowledge and supportive nature, right? Like the greatest resource, if there's really some kind of crisis, is the ability to connect with your neighbors, right? The greatest resource is the heart connection between people. It really is. But even more than that, like I was looking into the Lahaina fires, right? And one of the things that happened was there was one person in the town of Lahaina, their house didn't burn. It just didn't burn. Like some people's houses burned, some other people's houses didn't burn. And like they ended up with like 65 people in their house kind of like hunkering down during the fire because their house wasn't burning. But also to have the karma that your house doesn't burn, right? That level of supportive nature. What does that mean? And what does that require? It means fortifying the connection to the source of creation. Because the source of creation is administrating all the laws of nature. And the laws of nature are the ones that decide, are the parts, the aspects of intelligence of our creation that decide if the fire is going to burn that house or is not going to burn that house. That kind of decision isn't made on the level of individual intellect or even heartfelt desire. It's not even on the level of heartfelt desire. I'm sure the people whose houses burned, they had a heartfelt desire their house should not burn. It's decided on the level of the deeper level of consciousness, the deeper levels of consciousness, and the deeper connection and coordination, you could say, or harmony with the laws of nature. So how do we harmonize with the laws of nature? How do we get ourselves into be like best friends, BFFs with the laws of nature? You guys know that in the weeks before these webinars, I get downloads. I get like pieces of information come to me. Information comes and useful, valuable. And a lot of times it'll come and I'll think, what does that have to do with this upcoming webinar topic? That just seems dumb or something. But but one of the pieces that came that fits in really nicely here is that there are these three values, and they're values that we tend to think of as negative or destructive values: guilt, shame, and fear. And you guys have heard me say before that even the energies that we think of as like less positive energies can still be very evolutionary. And so we're going to talk for just a minute about how evolutionary these three values are. Maharishi once said that, I heard him say, that for an enlightened man, even the destructive laws of nature act in his favor. And for an enlightened man, the goal isn't comfort or just sensory satisfaction. For an enlightened man, not that sensory satisfaction isn't nice, enlightened man enjoys 200% of life, but that for an enlightened man, evolution comes first. It's really all about evolution. So the thing is that everything in creation, even dark energies or dark feelings, everything comes ultimately from the source of creation and thereby carries the sort of seed intention of the creator, of the divine, for evolution. So evolution, the intention for evolution is kind of baked into everything, you could say. Grace, we could call that grace, baked into every particle of creation. So I was looking at these and how they form a kind of hierarchy, because I was looking at how the culture was leveraging these values in order to promote, or in order to, I would say, control the way people respond to experiences, to external stimuli. They're used like we're a lot of times, like for example, some news stations will say, this is the fact. You make your own assumptions about that. And other news stations will say, this is the fact, and this is how you should respond to it. Have you noticed? Like it's different on different. I'm trying to look at as many as I can. And I've noticed that this is a difference from certain sides of the narrative, that some sides will be like, I'm just going to give you the facts and you can come to your own, draw your own conclusions. And the other side is, I don't trust you to draw your own conclusions. So I'm going to tell you what conclusions you should be drawing. It's very interesting. So, okay. Guilt, shame, fear. Guilt is something that it's one of those things that is yours and yours alone. And when the narrative, when the collective tells you that somebody else or something else is in charge of deciding when you should feel guilty, then you have to understand that that's not true. It's just you. This is a skill set, okay, for navigating through what's about to come. Is like you have to reject it. You have to say no. You don't decide when I feel guilty, because when I feel guilty, that is a signal that my body and my being produces to help realign me with my highest potential. That's guilt. Guilt comes when the alignment is off, when the relationship with the laws of nature has gone a little awry, right? The relationship's a little dissonant. It becomes a little dissonant. And then that feeling of like, oh, I'm off my mark a little bit. And so guilt is not something that anybody can hold over you. It is part of your own conscience. It's part of your own internal homeostatic system that allows you to find your balance again. So enjoy that. Enjoy that guilt when it comes up, because the sooner you notice it, the sooner you kind of the better sensitized, let's say, the better sensitized you are to your internal guilt, the earlier you pick it up, and the sooner you realize, oh, wait a minute, I must have been making a mistake on that account, and the sooner you are able to right your behaviors. I feel as if we need to, at this moment, I'm going to go to shame and fear in just a second, but I feel like in order to go through these, we need to also do some energy healing for everybody. And one of the points here is, it was just on the tip of my tongue. Hang on. The pattern of or habit, and this pattern or habit tends to sit ancestrally for a lot of people, to avoid pattern of avoidance, of avoiding issues and problems and topics, right? Like even me, like I'm here doing this webinar on like the current cultural demise that we are facing, and I'm avoiding using certain words, and I'm avoiding bringing up as examples particular topics that are charged, right? That are especially divisive. Not too much, so I feel like I'm dancing around them, okay? But the point is that the pattern of avoiding is diametrically opposed to the pattern of being sensitized to your own guilt and picking it up early, because the earlier you pick it up, the better. The earlier you pick it up, also the less likely that somebody around you is going to pick it up and decide to leverage it to control you. The earlier you pick it up, the sooner you start to change your behavior and realign with the highest. Realign with, right, virtue, morality, ethical behavior, the principles upon which not only your life, but the life of the whole society is able to thrive. There's also some nice discernment coming in. So what's happening is that pattern or that habit of sort of the knee-jerk habit of avoiding is clearing from the 4 dense levels of the physiology. It's also clearing at the astral level of the physiology. As the avoidance clears, we step forward into discernment, because of course one has to act appropriately and make careful choices about what to bring forth and what not to bring forth. And when, remember that it's that 4th leg of Dharma. Sometimes you're talking to someone who's so busy avoiding themselves that there would be no point in trying to dive into the depths of a conversation that's rife with dissonance. So discernment, when to avoid and when not to avoid, and particularly founding that discernment on the principle of evolution. So basically, we want to move forward, even if something's a little uncomfortable or a little difficult, we want to move forward into it, um, based on its potential to support the evolutionary process. And to do so in a way by by like turning up the dial here in the third ventricle of the brain, turning up the dial of sensitivity on guilt. Yes, so many regulating organs are in the third ventricle of the brain, and it's like deep in the limbic system. And the limbic system is the part of the brain that processes feelings and emotions. So, yes, you've got a guilty dial. You've got a guilty dial. I mean, it's not that you want to like feel horribly guilty and be flagellating yourself, but it is that you want to be aware very early if you're violating a natural law. If you're violating natural law somewhere, you want to catch it early and make amends and then move on. Simple. Guilt. This shift for the third ventricle of the brain, for the four dense layers of the physiology, for the astral body. And what happens in the astral body as all this is clearing out is that at the astral level, the physiology, should I bring up a chart? There we go. Everybody can see. So astral body is down here. This is denser, physical body, etheric body, mental, emotional. These are the four dense levels of the physiology, and these are the subtle levels. And the ocean of being has a whole dictionary full of names, and I'm using here the source of creation and divine being and ocean of being, ocean of bliss, the home of all the laws of nature. And here at the astral level, as this clearing is taking place, the threads or structures of the astral body become more orderly. They become more refined. They start to flow with the values of Dharma, purity, especially purity, to support evolution, and to do so in a spontaneous way, basically, in a way that really, really upholds your evolution. Okay. Let's look at shame. So, shame is the quality that arises if guilt fails, and the individual's actions continue to be in somewhat violation of natural law. What happens is their friends and family and people they love will often come to intervene a little bit and say, hey, I love you. And I think that this, excessive use of alcohol isn't serving you, or whatever is the topic at hand, And the family, the friends, the community will, if they're loving, they'll do it in a loving manner, but they step forward, they stick their necks out, they sacrifice a little bit the chance of, they take a risk, of having a little dissonance in their relationship with you in order to support your ability to step back in alignment with natural law. So that's shame. And right now, I don't know if you guys know, but this is very popular. I have young adult children. So I learn about things of that world. And one of the big things of that world right now, and one of those storylines is that shaming is bad. Shaming, you must never. And of course, when shame is administered, when shame is administered lovingly from a genuine, deep desire to see you fulfill your full potential and to live a good quality of life, when the individuals around you are anchored to the source of creation, then when I'm using the word shame, it's not like a horrible, like shameful shame. It's more just like the people around you coming up and saying, hey, let's see if we can straighten this out. Can you, do you need my help to straighten this out? Because it looks like your guilt meter didn't go off. And so you didn't do it yourself. So I'm here to give you some support, something like that. But there's also something in our culture right now called shaming. And it's tricky because it makes people feel afraid to step forward and help their friends if they see their friends are off the mark. And I can give you an example. I was doing a sectional for musicians, for flutists, a couple months back, and my daughter was there, and she's like an adult, young adult, and at the end of the sectional, I wanted to just check everyone's instruments just to see how they're working and how it's, because I could hear with one of the people, especially, like his instrument didn't sound right. So I picked up his instrument, I blew a few notes on it. I realized that I couldn't get some of the notes to sound. And I looked at the pads, and the pads were ripped. They were just ripped to shreds. I'd never seen pads like that. And so I said to him, you will enjoy playing better. You will do better with this instrument if you take it over to West Music. It doesn't take very long, and it's not that expensive, and have them replace some of these pads. These are, you're gonna like it. Your flute's gonna play better. It's just gonna play a lot better for you. And my daughter turned to me and she said, "Mom, you're pad shaming him." Pad shaming him? I'm like, really? Really? Like, I didn't know pad shaming was a thing. And then another person who was there was like, well, you look at mine. Does mine need to go to the repair shop too? So like, thank you to that lady who said that, because she kind of helped balance things out just a little bit. But I was like, pad shaming. So I guess you can take the word shaming and you can like literally put anything in front of it, any word whatsoever, and it becomes something that you need to feel ashamed about. If you bring up the topic, if you even so much as mention certain topics in certain circles, if you even so much as mention them, then that's considered socially inappropriate. Well, I'm sorry to say that one of the ways that we as a culture support ourselves and help ourselves navigate through the worst of situations is by being transparent and also kind. Like, I wasn't like calling anybody names. I was just speaking the truth, right? I was just saying the fact. And that it shouldn't be, that needs to not be illegal. That needs to not be illegal. The truth needs to not be illegal. So shame, when the awareness is anchored to the source of creation, even the darkest, well, that looks like the aspects of Dharma, doesn't it? Oof. Maybe I'll use the other hand. When awareness is anchored to the source of creation, when one is established in Dharma, when one is working toward evolution, then even these darker feelings become very, very useful. So shame becomes useful at like the sort of small circle level of society. It's really, really useful there. And it really helps people help each other stay on track. Fear. Oh, can we do is there healing we can do for that? Do we want to do a healing for that? I think we're going to keep moving along. I'm already running. Can you believe it? I'm already running out of time. Okay, so we'll go to fear. Fear comes in when guilt and shame have not done their work. And one finds oneself facing consequences of retribution from the larger level of society. That means like breaking laws. It means like having to face getting arrested or something, right? So that's fear. Fear is going to be a stronger motivation for people, for a person, to stay on track. Then, now what we want to do is we want to make guilt the biggest motivator. Because if you can catch any mistakes at the level of guilt, personal guilt, you're golden. You're going to be golden. You won't even have to go through getting teased a little bit by your siblings or whatever, right? And you'll never have to face off with those harsher consequences that come when a person is really, really out of line and they're acting in a way which is very non-supportive of everyone in the environment. Okay. So, guilt, shame, and fear. May they be the tools that you come to love and appreciate and value and utilize in the course of your life that help keep the evolutionary process moving forward. Always anchored to the source of creation, they always will. Okay. So we don't need to clear them. We just need to use them properly. Okay. So there were some just like amazing questions that came in, but I wanted to, and let's see, there are probably some questions up here. Oh, yes. So I'll take one from up here first, and then we'll go to some of the ones that came in via email. Can we do a healing to replenish and amplify courage, confidence, strength, patience, and hope? Confidence, strength, patience, and hope. Healing. These are okay. So I got it. Just a little transcending. It's like, oh yeah, there's the answer. So remember I mentioned the richas, these impulses of the divine that sort of issue forth into our world. Now, all the details of the world, like these lovely mountains behind me, someone said, is that Mount Fairfield behind you? These are the Grand Tetons behind me. Yeah, it's just a little poster. Anyway, before the Grand Tetons manifest, before the details of this material world manifest, those impulses from the source of creation come up as pure forms of divinity. And it's interesting, these points that you mentioned in your question, they are all qualities of pure divinity. There are many, many, many qualities that we would call just pure divine form: courage, confidence, strength, patience, hope. But then the values of Dharma. I think I talked about this on the last webinar as well. Remember, we were talking about truth and innocence and purity, I think I mentioned, and compassion, and even something like pure discernment. Pure discernment, still a very, very pure quality. These very pure, so the impulses, the richas, they begin as these crystalline values, these very, very pure values, or pure expressions of pure consciousness, we could say. And then what happens is they start to mix and form together to create more complex forms. And as they form together, they create forms that are like more nuanced, right? You could say, like, you could have, for example, in the case of Dharma, this is a perfect example. You've got these 4 fundamental expressions of divinity. Truth, or we'll say them in the Sanskrit: Satya, Karuna, Sattva, and Tapas. And sometimes you put them together. Sometimes you combine these 3 with this one, because truth acts like a splint that helps the other 3 work in a more effective manner to sustain creation. And so what you can have sometime are compassion and truth together. Compassion and truth working together. And when they work together, they kind of create this like synergistic relationship that then becomes an energetic structure in the body that can go in and act as an antidote for the imbalances. So the anonymous attendee who asked this question, I understand from your question that these are the qualities of the divine that specifically act as the antidotes for the challenges that you're facing and the areas of your physiology and the parts of your life. And they can work together: courage, confidence, strength, patience, and hope. Especially that hope. I love how that hope is in there. It's really nice. I'd say the other four kind of are in a family together, like they're, as qualities of divinity rise up, they're kind of courage and confidence and strength and even patience are kind of these lovely, stable values that tend to be the finer expressions. They tend to be very, very refined values that tend to associate along more of the masculine spectrum, which is interesting. Even hope, in fact, all four of those qualities I tend to associate with the most fundamental form of masculinity, which is that quality of being a spark that initiates manifestation. That's the male value. The male value is that hope, like that inspiration. It brings these like the seeds of the creation, you could say, whereas the female value nurtures the seed, it cares for the seed, it provides the context for the seed of inspiration to find its way to the manifest level of expression. There are also really good qualities for the hero on the hero's journey, or the heroine on her journey, the goddess on her goddess journey. So what does that do? When those qualities activate, it heals the masculine values of your nature, the right side of the body, right? Because the right side's the masculine side, the left side's the feminine. The male lineage, fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers. It digs down into the epigenome of the DNA, around the DNA, that area, that electromagnetic reality, which brings me to another download that I got in the last 2 weeks, but I don't think I'm going to get to it tonight because I'm going to be answering questions. But still, we'll touch on it tomorrow. But the electromagnetic field that's around the DNA informs the DNA how to show up. And these qualities, courage, confidence, strength, especially, right? Patience and hope, they provide a level of integrity to the cells at the subcellular level. At the subcellular level, the DNA, how it shows up, that allow the cells to participate as functional members of the body collective in a much more integrated manner. That's really important. It's really important because it's the cells in the body that go rogue that create trouble. But healthy cells know that they're part of a functional collective and they support the highest health in the body. So this is also an antidote for cancer. In the epigenome, the activation of these qualities, courage, confidence, strength, patience, and hope. See what you did? You put these together, you put these qualities together, and through their activation, and how do they get activated? Awareness brings them, awakens them in the field of like presence, their presence in the awareness. We activate the presence in the awareness. And then awareness transcends, goes to the source of creation. So we have these 5 beautiful qualities, and then the awareness transcends. And what comes out of the transcendent are all the ways, the inspiration, the spark of life, of how these qualities are applied in the physiology to promote highest health. It's really beautiful. You're really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for offering that, especially to help anybody in our session who may be dealing with illnesses that are really rough. And of course, the best medicine is preventative medicine, yes? So it goes that way too. It increases integration at a subcellular level of the body so that the cells in the body keep remembering. They remember. So you could say that the courage, confidence, strength, patience, and hope are the frequencies. They're like the shruti, the sound frequency. And then the sound frequency activates the memory, and the cells remember. I am part of this community. And the evolution of the whole is every bit as important as my own individual evolution as a single cell. And then the story that emerges is a story of health. So beautiful. I could go on all night just on that one question, but I have a bunch of other questions. So let's do. Thinking about upcoming webinar subject, reflecting on the Maharishi effect. So for those of you who don't know, the Maharishi effect is the effect that occurs when people come together, just like we're a little bit, not exactly the way we're coming together, but specifically the Maharishi effect is when people come together and transcend. That means they take their awareness to the source of creation together as a collective, simultaneously, in a reliable, consistent manner. And this is measurable. It's measurable and it's beautiful. And his question is, how does the energy of transcending and awakening, so he includes both the process of awareness going in and reaching the source of creation, as well as awakening, which I would reframe just a little bit as when that pure source experience of the source of creation comes out and becomes integrated with the physiology, so it becomes very much embodied. We become embodied of that quality. Excuse me. Little need for a little refinement right there. So transcending and awakening. So the presence of the divine within and the presence of the divine integrated into every particle of creation and every particle of the self, oneself. On an individual level, how does the energy of transcending and awakening on an individual level translate into healing on a global level? So you can see the man who wrote this question is really thinking holistically, right? Because he knows that the topic of tonight's webinar are really the kind of big changes that are clearly occurring at this time that are going to impact everyone globally. What is that radiance of transcendental knowledge? Notice how, like, the other person who put the answer in the question, like asking, I love that he asked it that way. What is that radiance of transcendental knowledge? What can we do to support, enhance, and focus that? It's a great question. What is that radiance of transcendental knowledge? What is that radiance of the divine in the material field of creation? It doesn't really have words that can describe it, as we know, but we can experience it. It can be experienced, but not described. It can be experienced but not really known in the classical sense of knowing. Because in order to know it, it would have to have qualities, and it's quality-less. But that transcendental radiance is that unknowable Brahman. It is that totality, that brightest of all aspects of creation, eternal. And it is your root. It is your source. It is your essential self. It is who and what what you actually are and what you're made of. And of course, in energy healing, and in the case of the question about focusing it, on the global level to help to create a better world for everyone, it is coming forth to produce effects not only for the individual, each individual. Obviously, if the individual's having the experience of transcending, then they become an instrument or a beacon of that with a capital T, that. But what do we do to support and enhance focusing it? The first thought that comes to my mind, and I know this is a really silly thought because this isn't probably something we're going to do, but the first thought that comes to my mind is I'm reminded of a moment when I was looking years ago. The YouTube algorithms would inevitably, no matter what I clicked on on YouTube, would inevitably take me back to things like aliens and pyramids and stuff like that. The YouTube algorithm changed over time, and so it doesn't do that anymore. But there was a time when whatever you clicked on, the suggestions on the side would become more alien oriented. So I remember one time I was watching a video about pyramids, and it said in the video that what they would do is they would stand around the base of they would encircle the pyramid. And I realized that because of the shape of a pyramid, no matter where you stand along the base of the pyramid and look up, you will always look to the same point that everybody else standing around the pyramid is looking. Oh, interesting, isn't it? Pyramids do that. It's something that it's almost like, right? Because of their shape, it doesn't matter where you stand around the circle of the pyramid. If you're standing there with all your friends and everybody's standing at a different point around the pyramid, you look up, you're all going to go up to the same point. And I realized that if the people of the ancient world had a big intention that they wanted to manifest, maybe they wanted the rains to come well that season and for the growing season to be good, they could hold the intention in their mind. We're all going to stand and we're going to all focus to the same point. And at that point where all the energies kind of converge, the energy of our awareness, which literally at the astral level flows on threads, like they're actually actual streams or threads that awareness flows, they would all converge on a single point. That's interesting. Now, this is complicated. How much time do we have? Oh, God, we're over time. Okay, that's no good. Because there's something really complicated that I want to tell you. Don't worry, I'm going to get to everybody's questions by tomorrow for sure. But let me just, even though this is complicated, then I now challenge myself to say the complicated with fewest possible words. If you don't want to have a cruel dictator running your country, if you don't want to have a cruel dictator running your country, then what you do is you disperse the decision-making processes to the collective, and you create an establishment that has different branches, and the different branches work together with a common intention, in order to support the quality of life for everyone. And that's kind of what we have in the West. We have this system that is made up of government leaders. It's made up of media that dispenses the information, right? It's made up of experts in fields, experts in the world of academia, and other areas too, business and, you know, business and I don't know, there are other areas besides academia and business, right? Religion. Anyway, we have experts in different fields, obviously, scientists who are experts on the climate and experts on pandemics and experts on this and that. And they're working together, ideally, for the common good of the common man, we're the ones who vote those legislators into office, and we're the ones who give our hard-earned tax dollars so that wealth can be distributed in a way that will benefit all of society. And ideally, the common goal is for the upliftment of the whole culture and society. But because the responsibility for success or failure of various projects is distributed sort of throughout that field, no one ever really has to take blame when the project doesn't work properly. He did it. No, he did it. Right? And the other thing is that, remember how I was saying earlier, how everything, because that truth was under attack because every part of the internet wants your attention. It wants your love. It wants your attention. It wants you to look at it. Look at my ad. No, look at my ad. You know, right? Like they all want you to look. So all these players have a kind of common goal. We think, oh, well, they're working independently and they're all experts in each in their own area, and they're all giving us the best that they can give us. But the problem is it's like the watchmen are watching themselves. They're not really self-regulating. I'd say those values of guilt, shame, and fear don't really come into play in that system very well. And so the net result is that each are striving to gain maximum notability or notoriety in their field. So say something happened like a bad virus broke out. Or a virus broke out, but nobody knew exactly how bad it was. So they would go to the experts on viruses and say to them, there's this virus, like, how bad is it? Like, do we need to be really worried or maybe just a little bit worried? And of course, the experts say to themselves, if this is a really big problem, then more of those resources are going to come to me. So regardless of how big the problem actually is, if I tell those who are not in the know and that take my word as authority, that this is a really, really big problem, then I become the receptacle. I become the source to which all those resources flow. Right? Is it not true? It happens like that. It happens like that. Not any particular specific situation, but you can imagine that it's in the best interests of the experts in any area that anybody ever goes, whether it's the media or it's the legislature, wherever they go to an expert and they say to that expert, you're an expert in this field. How important is this topic? What are they going to say? It's not important. Go away. No, what? No, they're going to tell you it's the most important topic, obviously. And so based on that, then more resources come for more research in the area. And, you can see how it goes and all the distribution. So the distribution of wealth and power is based on how those individuals define truth. Based on how they define the truth, they control the narrative. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times within that system, within that established system, there's a belief that's held among the players of that system. And so that includes government and media and academia, and that the common man cannot be trusted to really know the truth. You and I cannot be trusted to know the truth. We must always be dependent upon those experts, because if we're not, then for our own safety and well-being, then we would make mistakes. Energy healing on that level comes down to opening the channels for your truth. Opening the channels so that those richas, what truth? The richas are the truth. There is only one source of creation, and it is pouring the truth out into this creation constantly. And your ability to absorb it, to catch it early, to have your guilt meter on strongly enough that you stay aligned with the laws of nature and you see those laws of nature. You're working with the laws of nature. You're feeling them. You're interacting with them. This is the key for the collective to own truth at that level, so that discernment is used when information starts pouring in through the external channels. There's a lot of truth, you guys. There's a lot. We are not dumb. We are smart. We are smart. And we know that when, I think it's beautiful that when he asks this question, the second to the last question is, what is that radiance of transcendental knowledge? The truth is always marked. It's always flagged by the value of transcendental knowledge, transcendental being, divine being, that unknowable, beautiful, eternal source of creation that you experience directly. When the truth comes, you know it's the truth because it has a value in it that allows you to directly experience the light of the divine within it. And doing so, this is part of the healing, causes a reaction inside of becoming more stable and grounded in that direct experience of transcendental being. If the response of the physiology, and when I say physiology, I mean from the gross level all the way down to the subtle level, if the response to the information in the physiology is greater integration of divinity, that means greater capacity to embody that eternal, infinite, unbounded, absolute being, then you know you've got the truth. You know it. And we looked a little bit tonight, just the one word of review, we looked a little bit tonight at how that divine being shows up in like more simple fundamental forms, and then those forms work together to create more complex nuanced forms, right? So you can take whatever the information is and you can follow it back to its fundamentals. Is the fundamental impulse behind a piece of information that's coming to you from the media, is the fundamental behind that the desire for someone else to have power? If it is, I suggest that you question it. That's all. Am I being too cocky? Oh, I don't know. My guilt meter's on full blast right now, guys. Sorry. Anyway, I'm really grateful for the questions. I see more questions have come in here, and I've got a whole stack of them on my desk. So I might think about that one, because the man who wrote that question always asks questions that are very, very penetrating. So if I can if I can tease more out from that, which I think I may be able to, I will present tomorrow. And I think tomorrow we'll go straight into questions and more healings. And yeah, and yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to it very much. And I'm so grateful to each of you for sticking with me to the end. Oh my goodness, you guys stuck with me, even though I went a little over time. Thank you so much. So I'll try to stick a little closer to our time tomorrow. We'll answer lots of questions. If anybody has any more questions, please email them in and I will do my best to answer absolutely all of them. And maybe we'll even look at this list of the most of the AI, including AI. There was a question about that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, so all the kinds of very interesting, unprecedented challenges that are facing us at this time. All right, my dears, best wishes to all, sweet dreams to those of you who are going to bed. Have a beautiful day to those of you who are just waking up on the Pacific Rim. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.